This week on Rockstar Superhero. If you were confronted with a life or death situation, how do you think you would respond? Would you bear down and deal with the circumstances and worry about the consequences later? How would you respond emotionally? I mean, would you pray? My guest today, Charles Cure of the brutal New York-based sludge metal band Hush, encountered such an experience a few years back. For Charles, his experiences were life-changing, but affirming all at the same time. Charles definitely knows what he wants, and nothing was going to get in the way of the bigger picture. The details of this moment are explained in the show today, so prepare for the unexpected. Personally, I didn't see this coming at all, so hang on to something. This is my intimate chat with Charles Cure of Hush, and this is Rockstar Superhero. I was talking to a buddy of mine recently, and he was saying, you know how William Shatner, you know, Captain Kirk, right? He never gets older. It's like he's been 90 forever. You know?
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And it's because he has a young man's voice still. He has a young man's mindset and a young man's voice. Sure, he looks like an older gentleman, but there's something about that, you know, like he doesn't talk like, hello, Sonny. You know what I mean? It's very young.
Yeah. He has like a pretty powerful voice, I feel like, too, you know? And it's like instantly recognizable.
Totally.
You know? Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things, like, you ever like go and see a band live and they're really awesome and then it makes you enjoy their records more. I feel like there's a similar thing going on with him where, like, when he talks, because he has the same voice he did when he was on Star Trek, you just picture him as a younger dude, you know?
So true. And there's something about seeing a band live too, you know, because we don't ever say the term, we go to hear a band. We don't. We say we're going to go see a band, man.
Oh yeah. It's the totally different experience, you know?
Yeah. Well, man, dude, Charles, welcome, man. I'm really stoked you're here. It's obviously great to sort of virtually meet your voice anyway.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you, and it's great to meet you.
Cool. Thank you so much. Well, let's jump right in. Let's talk about you a bit before we hit the record. Is that cool?
Yeah, no, 100%, man.
Right on. I don't know much about upstate New York or central New York in your case. And, you know, I've been there once, and that was over in Buffalo years ago when I went to Niagara Falls because, you know, you got to do the Niagara Falls.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
You know, but I've never been to the Catskills. I've never been to Hudson. I hear you're from Hudson. And I'm curious, you know, did you grow up close by? Did you grow up in Hudson? Have you been there your whole life?
I grew up across the river from Hudson, across the Hudson River from Hudson.
Gotcha.
I grew up here, and then I moved away for a while to go to college, and then I was in a band in my 20s that toured a lot, and did that for a few years, and then I wound up coming back here for a job situation, and I just kind of stayed in the area. And right now I live about 20 minutes north of Hudson, actually, and our bass player lives right in Hudson, and he actually owns the property where we built the studio to record our records. So that's kind of why that's our home base. It's like our recording studio, our practice space, everything else.
Yeah.
So,
it makes sense, man. It's efficient. It's you know, it's local. You don't have to drive an hour and a half. You don't have to pay mega bucks to rent out a crazy, crappy place that, you know, you get washed out by other bands right next door.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's actually kind of like this whole wild story. I mean, we, you know, we're writing this record, and we took a long time to write it, kind of, I think, like probably about 5 years when all is said and done, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, he bought a house, and he had this big kind of barn garage thing that he didn't really need to use. So he started renovating it and turning it into a studio maybe like 2.5 or 3 years ago. And now it's like a fully functional studio space, and other bands record there pretty frequently. Like every couple weeks, he seems to have a band recording in there
Right
now.
on.
And yeah, I think there's 3 engineers in there now. So
Wow,
it's a
man.
whole, yeah, he really did like a whole crazy thing with it, and it's become like a real thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's benefited you clearly. I mean, listen to that music, man.
Yeah, no, it was really a great thing for us, and part of why we did it was because before we did this record, we had never actually spent more than 2.5 or 3 days in a studio to record a record.
Right on.
And it's just like if you have everything nailed down, you can go in and kind of hammer it out like that, but it doesn't leave a lot of room for experimentation or for trying out some ideas. So we figured if we had our own studio, we could just kind of spend a long time, trying to work the songs
Yeah.
out, and that definitely benefited the process.
Yeah, that's rad. Reading your story, I mean, obviously, again, you and I have never met before today.
Yeah,
So a lot of what I know about you is through promotional materials I've received from, various people across
sure.
the music landscape, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And, it's something that I hear in your voice that's really fascinating to me. And I think a lot of it comes from your story, the car accident story, that whole thing.
Oh,
And
sure. Yeah.
and you know what it is, dude? There's a level of patience to you. And I like that you're not in a hurry to tell the story. And that seems to apply based on what you just said. It seems to apply towards the music too. It's all about sort of doing the right thing and figuring it out and turning Hush into something that's significant because right, you're finding your voice and you're developing versus let's get this out, let's hope somebody falls in love with it, let's try to be rock stars, that whole stupid thing that most people do.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
for sure. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, like I have been in bands at this point for like more than 25 years, I think.
Yeah.
And so when I was younger, there is kind of that, like I was in a bunch of hardcore bands and a couple like kind of like emo screamo bands,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of stuff was like, oh, it's very urgent and you got to like do it right now. Those kind of bands, they sort of last a few years and then they break up.
Yeah.
And you know as a more mature adult, because I know I'm not going to be a musician for a career, for a professional job or anything. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes more of like a project where you really want to just put something out into the world, both for yourself and for other maybe like-minded people to find and grab a hold of if they happen to stumble upon it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice, man. I'm just, like I said a second ago, I mean, it's true, man. I probably say this too much, but yeah, I'm just stoked you're here. And I mean, I'm stoked you're here physically in the sense of like survived, right? I mean, I know we'll get
Oh
to
yeah,
that. I mean, I do
for
want to
sure.
talk about that because I think that's a huge part of your story. It's a huge part of Hush's story, clearly.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, and it has a big influence on this record because we started writing this record kind of right after that happened.
Right.
And right after that happened also kind of coincided with a period of real upheaval within the band, in terms of just like we had a few lineup shifts and people had some personal reasons that they needed to step away for a while, and then a couple of them came back during the period of writing, and then a couple of them left again.
Yeah.
So there was this whole that it just seems like that event kind of started this period of uncertainty in the band that really you can feel it in the record as a kind of form of tension, I think, a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah. Well, after reading the story and talking to you today, it's pretty clear you've, you've sort of exercised those demons on this record. I mean, I think that's a pretty powerful testimony to who you are and what you've gone through and where you're going.
Definitely. I mean, I hope that it comes across on the record in the way that it has some emotional impact. And I also, should emphasize that it's the whole record's certainly not just about that, but
Sure.
there is sort of like when something like that happens to you, it kind of just leaves a mark on you, and everything you do after that has a little bit of that in it, no matter what, because you can't keep it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Since we're on it, man, let's just jump into it if that's cool. I mean, are you cool with talking a little bit in depth about that story? Because
Yeah.
before you say anything, I was in a head-on car accident when I was 15 years old, and we all survived. But I remember I was in the back seat of a car, and this is the era of nobody wears seatbelts, right? So this is 1982.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah.
like John Belushi died the day before. This is a true story. John Belushi died the day before. I'm going home super late at night. My family, picked me up from my grandparents' house, and my mom takes the rural road on the way home because she doesn't want to get in a car accident on the freeway. I'm not kidding.
Oh, yeah. It's a classic move, right?
Yeah. And we got hit head on by a drunk driver.
Oh, God, that's terrible.
And I woke up, I was asleep, and I woke up as the accident, of course, was occurring,
Right.
And when I sat up in the seat, because I was a jumbled mess, my dad turns around and his face was like straight out of like The Shining, man. He had just completely eaten the windshield, and
oh my God.
there was just blood and glass everywhere, and these white eyes peering out of it. And dude, this is no lie. On the radio, because when we hit the the car, my dad's hand hit the radio and turned up the radio like to top volume. So while the car is dying, the engine is sputtering and clunking. On the radio is Joan Jett singing "I Love Rock and Roll."
Oh, holy shit, man! That's such a strange like juxtaposition.
Yes.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, dude. And here's what's crazy. And then I promise because this show is not about me, but I've never told this story before. So that happens, and I hear this weird voice like underneath the mix, like this creepy, scary, gurgly, deep voice, like a satanic thing, right? And yeah, dude, it was totally trippy. And the crazy part was it happened at 2 a.m, and this guy drives up and checks on us to see if we're okay, and he helps us out, and he helps us into his truck. And I'm sitting there with my mom and my brother, and this is true, Charles. This is true. I'm sitting there with my mom and my brother. We're all quiet. We're all dumbfounded. We all feel sick to our stomachs. None of us know if my dad's going to live, all that stuff,
Oh, and, it's traumatizing.
Oh,
chaotic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my brother says, and this is no lie, my brother says out loud, "Did you guys hear that?"
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So, then it's not just like in your head,
Correct. And you know what it said?
What?
"I'm coming to take you to hell."
What? My God, what?
Yeah. Yep. And my mom heard it too. We all three heard it. And so every time I hear Joan Jett on the radio, I get the whole piss shiver thing, you're like, oh.
Well, it's like, it's pretty clear that they failed to take you to hell, though.
Yes. This could be hell, dude. You and I could be experiencing the best parts of it.
That's true, man. Maybe hell is actually just not that bad.
Yeah, I was starting to think that it could be just like a whole bunch of political dickweeds.
Yeah, right. It's like it's just corrupt politicians and rich people. Turns out we've been there for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe totally. I didn't survive the wreck, dude.
And I blame it on Ronald Reagan. How about that?
Oh man, that is where it all started.
So tell me your story, because obviously I want to get to the record. It's a killer, man. It's a killer. Pornography of Ruin.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, and and I'd love to hear about your experiences with this car accident, the aftermath, your recovery process, because dude, it's a lot to go through, and when you think you're gonna die, you know what I mean, you start believing it after a while. So
oh yeah, man, it's so intense. So
fill me in.
So really it was I had left my job to go back to my house, which is like 20 minutes away from my job. And at the time, I was living in a super rural area.
Gotcha.
So I lived on a really rural country road in the middle of the woods. And, it's the kind of place where like the roads are so little traveled that like a car would pass my house like maybe once every hour or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was out there, it was pretty close to my house, like a couple miles away. I was trying to pick up a laptop to bring back to work. And I was going down this narrow country road that has a lot of winds and hills in it. And as I was approaching the top of this hill, another driver in another car was coming up the hill and I couldn't see them. And their car was just in the middle of the road. And when we both got to the top of the hill at the same time, she hit me and knocked my car basically right off the road. And, the sort of weird thing about it was that while I was driving, I actually had my phone on the seat next to me. I was talking to my mom on speakerphone. And so my phone fell onto the floor and luckily was undamaged and still on. So I was able to just tell my mom to call 911 and where I was, but it was insane. It was like I knew that it was going to happen like a split second before it happened, and then the airbag like blew up in my face, and I'm pretty sure it like knocked me out for a second.
Yeah.
And then like I came to, and my right arm was broken. I actually like thought there was something wrong with my stomach for a minute because my hand was resting on my stomach and it felt real weird. And then I went to move it and just like my bone moved inside
gross.
like near my bicep or whatever,
Yeah.
I couldn't move my hand at all. And I was like, so yeah, that thing's fucking broken.
Yeah.
And when I looked down and there was just like where the driver's side floor of my car was, there was just a huge hole ripped in it. I could see the road, and at the time I didn't realize like I had also really severely injured my right leg as well. But it looked like it just had a little cut on the outside of it and it was swollen. And so, this was all so chaotic, but within like a minute or so, you kind of realize what's going on. And the other driver was in her car, like screaming, and there was an enormous puddle of gasoline under her car. And I just thought immediately, like, I have to get out of my car and get away from this. Yeah. So, I like kicked open the door of my car and walked out into the road. And my leg was so badly injured that I basically just passed out in the middle of the road for a minute. Wow. And when I got back up, I was like, I actually thought for a second when I came to that I had like been asleep and been dreaming it, and I was like, man, that was the fucking worst dream ever,
Started for laughing, but I know what you mean.
No, yeah, I was like, that was fucking so awful. I'm glad that wasn't real. And then like I felt the road underneath my face, and I was like, oh fuck, dude, that was definitely just that really happened for sure. And so I managed to like get up onto my butt and I kind of just scooted myself over to the back of my car because it was off the road, and I sat up against it so that I wouldn't be on the road, and obviously I knew that somebody was on the way to help, and I just I sat there for a while. But when I first pulled myself up against the back of the car, I was my head was down, kind of like looking at my thighs or whatever. And right. I felt like the breeze blowing on my face. It was actually, what is the weirdest part that we're having this conversation is that it happened June 9th, 2016. Whoa. So it happened like, exactly
happy birthday
6 years ago or whatever. Yeah. It's my
life, brother.
Right. Yeah, it's my car accident anniversary. And so, like, I could feel the wind blowing on my face. It was a really beautiful day. And I was like, oh, I got to open my eyes and kind of see what's happening. And I realized actually that my eyes were already open and I just could not see at all.
Dude,
and
awesome.
I was like, immediately I was just like, this is what happens when you die.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, maybe I have like a brain bleed or something, like it's just so like unexpected, and you don't know how injured you are, but you're pretty injured. You just passed
Yeah.
out in the middle of the road. You were in a
Yep.
car accident, right? So I was like, I'm probably just gonna die,
Yeah.
like
Were you
there's no
scared?
reason.
Yeah.
It's not even like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of just like, because you're in shock,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
of course.
So it's almost like being high or something. You
Yeah.
just are calm, sort of, or at least I was,
Yeah,
you
no, I get
know?
that. I
Yeah.
get that. Yeah.
And I was just, I think I just like, this actually only lasted like a couple of minutes, but in that time, you kind of go through this whole very brief process of acceptance,
Hmm.
right? And I was just like, this is how my life ends,
Right, right.
potentially or probably or whatever. And I just tried to be calm, and just
Wow.
accept that it was going to happen. And then it was like the thing that happened was like when you turn on a really old tube television and it starts out with a little dot in the middle and then just bursts into a picture. It
Hmm.
was like that. My vision just kind of came back like that. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck just happened to me? You know? And then
Yeah.
like, yeah, then like a minute later there was like a fire truck came, and then the ambulance and some people came
Mm.
and began helping me. And yeah, I went to the hospital. I was in the hospital for a month. Basically, I could not walk for almost 6 months. Um, and it was just a really intense process of accepting your vulnerability as a person and allowing other people to help you and do things for you, which is a thing that I was not accustomed to before that as a
Yeah.
person. I just, I do a lot of things myself. I'm a pretty self-sufficient person.
Yeah.
And, at the time I was actually in the middle of renovating my house myself, so
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
I just was not used to anybody really doing anything for me. And literally while I was in the hospital bed, the first like week, I almost couldn't move at all,
Uh,
so I just had to have other people do everything for me, and that was it was kind of like, it's like shattering to your ego a little bit, right? I mean, you've
right.
got somebody basically like wiping your ass,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like you have to be used to just allowing other people to see you for who you are and help you and trust them, and that's difficult,
Yeah. But you know
yeah.
what? You know what, man? I gotta so thank you for sharing that, because I know that's like some deeply intense and personal stuff. And I know like there's a PTSD that comes with it, right? Like, yeah,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
survived and yeah, you've moved on and everything seems to be hunky dory. But the reality is, man, you went through an experience. Honestly, I know this sounds really messed up, but you went through an experience like people should go through. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
like
it
real
does.
life, like life or death, becoming good with that death thing. Like when you start discovering that it's not something to be afraid of, it's just something to accept because inevitably it's coming. Unfortunately, your situation didn't result in death, but it also, we're at peace with it. I mean, look at you now, dude. Look at you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Amazing.
yeah, I think that's a thing that's kind of important. And it's been like certainly like an important lesson for me after that event was that, you don't, I think you learn something about yourself in a moment like that that's really difficult to explain if somebody else hasn't experienced it.
Hmm.
Because I don't want to sound like a total idiot, but like I think you don't really know yourself until you face death or danger,
Sure.
right? Because you think you may react in certain ways to certain things, but when they become extremely and immediately real, and you discover how you actually react to them intuitively and naturally, you realize something about yourself. And I think uh, it made me less afraid generally, in the way that I just move through the world on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
that's really been extremely valuable to me in a lot of ways. I mean, I wish that maybe wasn't the way that I had to learn it, but I feel extremely fortunate all the time just to be here and be able to be privileged enough to do what I'm doing. So that's
Yeah.
also definitely worth saying.
Yeah, man, we could talk forever on this subject. And I think it's because it really is the deepest part of our humanity, right? I mean, when you get down to it, dude, when you get down to it, life is full of like, we get up and we eat and we do stuff, right? Like we're
Oh
basically
yeah.
like we're like fancy cattle.
Yeah, we're just living our little
Right?
routine and going through our little part
Yeah.
of the mouse maze or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
But then, when that happens to you, you have these experiences that you see in the movies or that, like your grandparents have in front of you, and you can't come to grips with it because, well, you can't identify with it. I love the fact, I mean, first of all, I love the fact that you're okay.
Yeah.
And I love that it's turned you into, an extraordinary artist. But what I think is so cool is now, I know this sounds strange. We don't know what's on the other side, but we know there's nothing to be afraid of about going to the other side, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's another thing too. I mean, not to get too deeply into like my personal beliefs or anything, but
Of course.
I have never been a religious person. I am an atheist, and I have been for a very long time.
Right.
And in that moment, sometimes people find some religion or something, and
Mhm.
I didn't, because of that. But I found, I think, this sort of way of understanding the world where I can have like a space for spirituality or belief in maybe transcendent experience, but I don't
Mhm.
need there to be, a God or whatever that gives that to me.
Sure.
And so I think it really does help you develop a kind of a better understanding of the strength of your ideas and your beliefs to the extent that you have those, and how in the moment when everything is on the line or whatever, like do you still think that afterwards, or do you still think
Right.
it even in the moment? I
Right.
wasn't like, uh I guess I was, if there was something that I was proud of myself for, it was that I didn't pray for life. Yeah.
I gotta honor that. You know what I mean? I know what you're saying. And I'm sorry for interrupting the rest of that story, but yeah, I get it. You are who you are, and you believe what you believe, or to, in your case, choose to believe to not believe, right? And
Right.
and I
Sure.
and I think that's really cool. It's so funny talking about it in that way, saying it's cool, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is you are you. And
Right.
I like Charles. You know what I mean? I can
Yeah.
tell. I
Yeah.
can tell I dig Charles. I can tell I would like to hang out with Charles, even if I can't see Charles right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I know,
And
man. Yeah,
and that
for
and that's
sure.
and that's really cool. You're clearly a good guy. You know, one of my best friends is a pastor of a church here, and I live outside of Seattle, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, and he and I go to like Gojira concerts all the time. I mean, he's like the coolest pastor ever, right?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah, I mean, he's like not offended by anything, and I talk about this every show, so people who listen to my show are going to roll their eyes right now. But like, I was complaining to him a couple years ago about like just being, see, I'm 55, right, and
Oh, okay.
I feel like the world has passed me by. I know that sounds completely pathetic, but it's true. I mean, I'm just sort of in my second life stage right now. Like I've totally gone through a midlife crisis. I mean,
Sure.
I'm on the backside of it, but long story short is I was asking, I was like, Rick, man, what do you think my purpose is? And he's like, are you kidding me? And I go, no, just like, what's my purpose? And he goes, your purpose is people, Rob. That's all of our purpose. And you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
that's really cool, Charles, because I mean, you're going to be who you are. And the beauty of who you are is why we're talking, right? I mean, we're connected because you've gone through the things you've gone through and you've created what you've created. And it happened to catch my ear and I dug it. And we're friends with the same promo company. So here we are.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you're telling me this story. And I'm like, man, this is a cool guy. And I like how your life through all its craziness has impacted mine right now. That's totally cool. So you're in your purpose, bro.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I appreciate that, and I am very glad to have connected with you because I'm enjoying this conversation a lot right now.
Cool.
And I think that's true. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I like making music and can't seem to stop. Like before I was in Hush, I was in a few other bands, like I said before, and the last band that I was in before Hush broke up a couple of years before Hush started. And at that point, I was in my early 30s and I really thought like maybe I won't be in bands anymore,
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had this little couple year period where I didn't do any kind of music. I didn't make music at all. I didn't really do a lot of creative stuff. I focused on some other stuff I was doing. I was a long distance runner for a while,
Oh, wow.
and that was one of the things that ended because of the accident. But I still am able to run. I just can't run like 10 or 12 miles a
Sure, but
day
that's
or whatever I
probably
was
what
doing
saved
before.
your legs, dude. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
like you were
yeah,
sturdy inside. You know what I mean?
it definitely helped me a lot when I was recovering, for sure. I was very glad that I had been like in serious shape or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but like, so then Hush just kind of was a thing that, Jordan, who plays bass in Hush, he plays this big instrument. It's like an 8 string bass or whatever.
Oh,
But
nice.
he and our original drummer they had just broken up their band and they were starting to look into playing some heavier, kind of slower, more sludgy, doomy stuff. And they knew me from past bands, so they asked me if I would come down to a practice, and I really liked it a lot. And I was like, you know what, this is this is how I'm gonna start making music again. I don't think I'm like ready to give it up yet,
Yeah.
and I'm really grateful for it, honestly, because it took me on a whole different kind of like creative journey as a person than I would have been on otherwise. And
Yeah.
it's been good for me.
Yeah. Man, that's such a great that's such a great way to put it. I mean, I love how much you've recognized how these things have sort of beautifully happened to you, right?
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? Because I mean, you could be like a lot of people. You could be like most people, man, and you could say, yeah, life's too hard now. You know what I mean? Like, especially with like
sure,
COVID the last few years where it completely F's with your brain and like you're like, okay, can I interact with anybody? And then it messes with the band and it messes, just messes with everything we know about life. And, a lot of people have
absolutely,
taken their lives. And, I don't want to
yes.
get too dark here, but I'm just, like I said, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here, bro.
Thank you. And just to touch on that subject for a minute, that is also something that informed this record a lot. I had during the period of just writing the record, three of my friends actually committed suicide,
Oh, God.
and the it was it's just difficult. It's an epidemic of its own in our
Yeah.
culture now, and
Yeah.
it's deeply disturbing to me, but also something that whenever I have some kind of a encounter with it's something that I try to empathize with and understand. Why somebody might make that choice for themselves, even
Yeah.
though I think it's obviously tragic. And so there's a significant amount of grappling with that type of stuff as well on the record.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been depressed in my life and I mean, not depressed. enough, obviously, to take my
Oh,
life.
sure. Yeah.
But like you, yeah, I've had a number of friends decide otherwise over the past, say, 25 years. And I mean, my best friend killed himself on Christmas Eve, for God's sake. You know what I mean?
Oh, man. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's like from a distance, and I really hope listeners are listening to this moment, but from a distance, you want to say the stuff that culture says. You want to say, oh, what a selfish guy, man. He totally took himself out, and we're the ones who are still suffering. We're the ones who miss him, all that stuff, right?
Sure, right. That's what the conversation is like a lot. Yeah,
It
definitely.
is, but you and I know different. That might be a feeling we have, but when you've been in the middle of something extraordinarily awful and you feel like there is no way to get out of that hole, it's really easy to start considering options. It's,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think actually like in my perspective, and I think I've tried to understand it this way more and more as I've had some experience with, people close to me. Um, I think what it is a lot more like is an extraordinarily intense moment of despair where a
Mm-hmm.
person makes a choice that they might not make if they waited even 5 more minutes,
Yeah.
and in that way, I think it's that's kind of where the tragedy lies in it, because it's very easy as an outsider to see like, oh, if you just waited a couple minutes until this feeling passed,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I, I mean, I think it's a very difficult conversation to have, and I try to, when I do think about it, I try to remove my own feelings about the person and just see how they might have seen it for themselves, and just hope that that they found some kind of relief, right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, you're so right, man. Like if anybody's listening to this show, I talk about this a lot, just so you know, Charles. And,
Yeah,
so especially like, because life is hard, man. It's
yeah.
hard. We get married, we get divorced, we fall in love, we break up, we live, we die, we get hit by cars, we get, in my case, I had 2,000 pounds of sheetrock follow me when I was a 13-year-old. We have
Holy
crazy,
shit.
crazy stuff happen to us.
Yeah.
And there's so many times all of us have probably been 5 seconds away from death, right?
Oh,
And,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and I was watching a documentary. You might have seen this, the one on the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I think it's just called The Bridge, and it's all about people who jump off the bridge. There's
Oh,
stories.
right. Yep. I have not seen it, but I know of it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there's video of like 10 different people actually killing themselves.
Oh, man.
And what's really fascinating is one of them survived. And he's interviewed, and you actually see the video of him jumping. And yeah, it's wild. And I started crying because he said, the moment I pushed off, he goes, I sat there and sat there and sat there. I wanted to die, I wanted to die, I wanted to die. And I pushed off. Like I finally had the courage to push off. And in a split second after I pushed off and I realized I couldn't stop, I wanted nothing but to stop and get back on that bridge. I did not want to die.
Yeah.
And here, maybe that's, I don't know, maybe it's a mindset thing. I mean, obviously you can't say I'm going to live when you're falling from 500 feet. But maybe in his situation, maybe he survived, again, this isn't a God thing, right? But maybe he survived because we all need to know that this isn't what they want. They wish they had waited 5 more minutes.
Right. And I mean, I think it's, extremely valuable for people like that to say what their experience was like, and tell it to other people, because I think since we're having this kind of a conversation, I also just want to say that I would never advocate for somebody taking that kind of step for
Of
themselves or
course.
anything like that. And I do hope that that when people are feeling like that, that they consider the option of just waiting until the feeling passes or reaching out to somebody or whatever. But I think it's important for people who have survived something like that to say, hey, you know, um, I thought the way that you might be thinking right now. And the moment that that I actually took the step to make it real, I wished I hadn't.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
But
Yeah.
you know what, man? It goes back. I'm sorry we're staying on this topic, but it's
No, no,
interesting. Is it goes back to what you walked through, right? I mean, look,
sure.
you're a highly capable guy. You like you said, you're a long distance runner, but you had to go through this brutal physical recovery, and I imagine there was a lot of thinking for a while, at least, that what I'm never going to be the me I was ever again. But there's
Sure.
something about being broken and having to come back from that. And I guess what I would ask you, just to maybe get back on topic with the record, is, of all the things that you've experienced and all the things you've written about, what would you say you've learned about yourself, in this experience, this process?
Well, I think, that experience, like my lived experience of like recovering from
Mm-hmm.
a very devastating injury like that was kind of actually like I did not spend a ton of time thinking about what had actually happened to me, and instead I thought about like what I was planning to do so that I could kind of like reform
Right.
myself afterwards.
Thinking forward.
And yeah, for sure. And so, literally like one of the first thoughts I had when I got to the hospital was that I wasn't going to be able to run again. And I was like extremely concerned about it, to the point where I was like I was asking the doctors that like before they did anything to me, and they were like, we have no idea. So, I started to think about that a lot, and what was I going to do if I couldn't, and as I progressed through my recovery, when I was able to exercise again, I started exercising immediately, and I found that it was going to be really difficult to run, much more than like a 5K at a time.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal to me. I was actually like training for a marathon when I was in the accident. So and I still have not run a full marathon, and that was like a dream that just kind of went into the wind.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to accept that and then figure out like, okay, how do I learn to be myself again, but in a different way? And
Yeah.
uh, I think it took me some trial and error and some different stuff, but I found a way to exist as to incorporate that experience and those injuries into my self concept. And then I became a different person that is in some ways, physically stronger than I was before, but not necessarily capable of doing all the same things I was before. And so the way that manifested itself on the record is really like a theme of like, uh, transformation of the self, kind of like a dissolving of one identity and a kind of a coalescing of another,
Mm-hmm.
and, not even just on a physical level, but on an emotional and personal level. And I think that's a really important thing, um, especially right now in our current cultural discourse. There's a lot of discussion of identity, in a political context, and whether certain people should be allowed to have their own self-concept and their own identity. And I also thought a lot about that while I was going through that process, because you're sort of like reforming your own identity, and to
Yeah.
think of what it would be like if someone told you, well, you can't be this thing that you want to be. You can't be this person. You can't be that thing. You can't reform yourself or whatever, and
Yeah.
how devastating that is as
Yeah.
well.
You know
You
what,
know?
man? Yeah, God, this This conversation is so awesome. Like, I love, I mean, you've gained a lot of wisdom from this, and I guess I would say this though, not to be cute, but dude, you ran a marathon. You just didn't run it the way you thought. I mean, you did a 40-year marathon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I went through it for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, no, I do think it was valuable. I feel like a much more calm and accepting person. And also I feel like I have a little bit of a remove from the kind of brutal intensity that can build up of just living your daily life and these kind of stresses of trivial things or whatever. I think that experience gave me the ability to kind of step back a little bit in certain moments and allow myself to come back to center and realize that to a large degree your perception of reality is kind of defined by the things that you choose to emphasize in your own thoughts, And so like, there are plenty of times in my everyday life where I'm very angry, frustrated, stressed.
Human.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I have all the same failings that everybody else does, but that ability to, in the moment, kind of like stop yourself and just break that cycle for a moment and step back and be like, okay, let's look at the entire picture of this thing, and
Right.
it brings you a little bit of calm and peace. That's like, I'm really grateful for it all the time.
Yeah, man, that's so cool, man. I really don't want this conversation to end, but I also know we've got, we probably don't want to kill the listeners too much. But look, let's talk about the album for a little bit before we cut.
Sure. Absolutely.
So it comes out 2 weeks, I think, from tomorrow, I think.
Yes. Yeah. It comes out the 24th. Yep.
Okay. It's called The Pornography of Ruin, which is a completely rad title. And the album cover is so legit. I was like,
oh man,
that is okay. So again, I'm a lot older than you, and album art was a really big deal when I was a kid, right? You got the Hugh Symes stuff that he did for Rush, and then you got the stuff that I can't remember his name, but that did like all the Yes albums, Tales Atop the Graphic Oceans, all this art, crazy stuff, and you never see that anymore. And your album cover it's just a photograph, but it's a badass photograph.
Man, I'll tell you what, the guy that took that photo, Adrian is his name. He is an urban explorer in Dallas, Texas. And he posts, on various social media, and he had posted this picture on Reddit, actually. And I came across it, and I was actually like in the middle of doing a totally different layout for this record. And I saw that picture and I could not stop thinking about it for days. And then I acted like a total psycho, and I messaged him on every single platform that he was on until he answered me. Yeah, I was like, look, man, I will pay you whatever you want to license this picture for our record. And then he actually was the coolest dude ever and just was like, you can use it for free, and send me some stuff when it comes out. And he has been a super cool person to just meet and like get to know a little bit. And I really like what he does. His Instagram name is Abandoned Dallas, and everybody should go check it out. There's tons of cool stuff on there. Yeah. But yeah, that photograph just it blew me away, and I loved it. And I just once I was able to get it from him, I was like, this is the perfect thing. This is exactly what we needed.
Yeah. It says exactly. Somehow it says exactly what that record's about, man.
Yeah. It was like the thing that was in my brain. I was just seeing it in front of me when I saw that picture, and I was like, oh, that's perfect, dude.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of symbolism, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I like, I mean, I also love album art. You know, I'm old enough to be from the era where CDs came in those huge boxes,
Right.
and the album art was actually like the size of a like a 12-inch record, except just a strip of it,
Right,
kind of.
right,
You know,
right. Yep.
yeah. And I thought that was so cool back in the day. I remember the first CD I bought like that was the Megadeth Peace Sells record, and
Yeah.
I just thought the art for it was so awesome and so badass. And so I still have like a real like love for that for the art of a record. I think it's very important what accompanies your music, you know, visually
Yeah.
speaking.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a whole statement. I mean, I deal in that, on the other side, I deal in digital merchandising, and yeah,
Sure.
it's that huge thing, man. It's all about what is it saying? What, you know what I mean? What does the band want you to experience? Because, like, going back to, what I said a second ago, I don't think, like, if your album was called Caskets, it,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it would just be pathetic, right? It would be like, well, that's right down the middle. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
totally.
the title is a great juxtaposition to the image, and obviously the titles of the tracks, and I love the spiritual names, if you will, of the tracks without it being spiritual, because I've, based on what
Oh,
we're
sure.
talking about, you're not a religious person, or driven by any faith, and yet the the track titles, almost feel like they're torn from the pages of the Bible.
Oh yeah, I mean, so like just quickly to give a little overview of that, every title of the song is a portion of a quote from something,
Oh, gotcha.
and that the first song that we released from the record, "There Can Be No Forgiveness Without the Shedding of Blood," is an
Yeah,
actual quote from the Bible.
yeah, yeah.
Um, that I found to be, I have always had that quote floating around in the back of my head because I was like, man, that is some violent shit, and
It
like
is. It is.
well, like the Old Testament's full of that stuff, I
Mhm.
mean, it's like a gold mine for metal, honestly. Uh,
Yeah, well,
you
yeah, on the
know,
other side, you don't even want to talk about the Jesus thing. You're like, wait a minute, this fucks up my whole narrative.
yeah, 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 exactly. You know,
Oh,
but yeah, so and I tried to I did try to kind of emphasize that sort of idea a little bit of something that I would find to have a deep to be like a deeply emotional or spiritual statement,
yeah.
for the title of each song. And I'm glad that you noticed that,
Yeah.
uh, you know. But yeah, yeah. So that's what that's all about. That's maybe why it comes off that way. Because I guess technically the way that I see it is like, oh, I didn't name these songs. I just kind of grabbed
R-
something that
Right.
I felt affinity with.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, based on what you shared earlier, talking about, your atheism and, the sort of lack of that, the others, what's on the other side and that spiritual belief stuff. I grew up in the church, so I recognized it and I was like, like, what is this guy trying to say? But what I love about it, Charles, is it's not, I mean, look, we're all going to sort of hold ourselves to our own sense of morals and ethics and our beliefs or our not beliefs or whatever. And none of that, I don't care about any of that stuff, in the sense of, all I care about is, are you truthful? Are you in
Sure.
love with life? Are you in love with, possibility? And, I mean, that's what it's about to me. It's not about, I don't want to say it's not about something like Jesus. I don't even want to go down that road. But what I
Sure.
what
Sure.
I what I want to say is Sam Kinison, the famous comedian. I don't know if you were
Yeah.
a Sam Kinison fan.
I was, man.
I loved
Oh,
him.
oh.
Oh my God, I
Yeah.
love that
It was
guy.
great.
Yep, I loved him because he spoke the truth. He spoke what we were all thinking. And
Yeah.
and yes, it offended people, and it should, because if you're pious, you deserve to be offended. You deserve it. And what I love is in one of his acts, he said, where in the Bible did it say build a water slide and use it for a tax write-off?
Yeah. Right.
And,
Right.
and another time it was like, people were doing all this, telling us to do all these things that they said he said, but he didn't say those things. It's all religion getting in the way of a good message. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, to me, the good message is love each other, support each other, honor each other, despite each other. And that's why I'm honored to have you on this show, man, because you're exactly the kind of human being I want to hang out with, I want to listen to, and I want to learn from, because you're more respectful of life because what you've walked through, and that can't help but color the rest of your days. So I just think you're badass, man, and I want this record to kill for you. I just want it to just take off and do all the things you want it to do.
Man, thank you. I really hope that that people get a chance to hear it, because I think it's a little bit different from what other bands are really doing with that genre particularly.
Yeah, for sure.
And I kind of think that the whole way it came about was really interesting, and it's the Hush record that I think I think a lot of bands say this about their records, but I think we were trying to write songs like this right from the beginning, and it's been a sort of a long process for us to be able to get there. But the vibe of this record, I remember when we first talked about writing it, is that we wanted it to, obviously be a heavy record because we're that kind of band, but we wanted there to be a particular emphasis on a sort of like emotional heaviness to it.
Yeah.
Like I really love a lot of not heavy music, and that was most of what I was listening to when we were writing this record. I was listening to a lot of like Townes Van Zandt and a lot of
Nice.
kind of like singer-songwriter stuff. I listened to a lot of weirdly, I went through like a whole phase of revisiting all the Iron and Wine records during writing this record.
Yeah.
And I just like that, so listening to some of that stuff, it makes me very sad, and that is the heavy feeling I've always wanted to communicate through heavy music.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I don't necessarily want people to be pummeled by anger and violence. I want them to be weighed down by kind of like the weight of the world itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Elliott Smith records are way heavier than Judas Priest records.
Yeah, exactly, man. Oh, I love Elliott Smith so much too, man. Yeah, no, I really do feel that, it leaves this kind of like weight on you afterwards, even though it's kind of quiet music, and it feels very intimate a lot of times with like quiet vocals and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, man. I mean, the album is clearly extreme. It's a wild and vivid and textural record. I'm a drummer, so I listen to stuff. You know what I mean? The arrangements are really, it's really well put together. And I feel like that record definitely is one of the few that you kind of get inside the mind, or maybe a better way is you get inside the experience of being, not just you, Charles, but the band, and I think you've made it really clear who and what you guys are about. So, man, I only wish you the best of success, and man, here's to Hush, brother.
Man, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I really loved having this conversation with you, man. So, stay in touch with me, man. We can just keep talking about shit forever.